Well, welcome everyone to this Budget Committee quarterly meeting on February 25th, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the Budget Committee of Clackamas County. Roll call. We'll just rotate this. Online, Commissioner West.
Commissioner West is here.
Thank you. In the room, Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Public Member, Mr. Cernak.
Here.
Chair Roberts.
Here.
Public Member, Mr. Karn.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Public Member, Ms. Radar.
Here.
Public Member, Ms. Lee.
Here.
Public Member, Mr. Rhodes.
Here.
All public members are here. Commissioner Fireside is not here today, so 9 members of the 10-member Budget Committee are present. Thank you.
Great. And thank you, Gary. Would you now introduce the first agenda item for us?
Yes, thank you. And forgive me, staff support today, Jane Veto, County Council, Sandra Montoya, Budget Manager, Cindy Becker, Project Manager in County Administration. This is the quarterly meeting of the County Budget Committee. Although you haven't been meeting quarterly, I apologize. That was an oversight, not on purpose. But we wanted to meet with you today to start the kickoff for the budget process you'll all be participating in just a few months here. And then you'll have another meeting coming up in April, which we'll talk about a little bit later today. Today is mostly an informational update to give you a status of where we are at with the county budget, kind of prepare you for what's coming in May. There's no decisions for you to make today other than to approve the minutes of your last meeting, which we'll talk about in a moment. Elizabeth Comfort, the Finance Director, is out sick today, so she regrets she cannot be here. But Sandra, Cindy, and I will run through the presentations for you today and ask any questions you have. We welcome them. Anything at all, and we'll have plenty of time for you to do that. So, Chair, if it's okay, we'll just move through the printed agenda. And first is approval of Budget Committee meeting minutes for the period of May 28 to 30, 2024, which is the last time you met as a Budget Committee. The minutes are in your packet. We would hope for either a motion to approve, or if you have any edits, would you please share them with us, and we can make those corrections.
Right. Do any of my colleagues or Budget Committee members have any comments, questions, edits they want to put? So seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the Budget Committee minutes from the period of May 28th through the 30th of 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Right. Commissioner Savas has moved to approve the Budget Committee meeting minutes for the period of May 28th through the 30th, 2024, seconded by Commissioner Schrader. Any further discussion? As I look around the room, see none. So clerk, would you call the poll for us?
Resident Member Carm.
Aye.
Resident Member Serich.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Resident Member Radar.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Resident Member Lee.
Aye.
And Resident Member Rhodes.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye. And
Motion passes 8-0.
right.
Should be 9-0.
9-0, forgive me.
Thank you. And Gary?
Thank you. Next, a high-level overview of the July through December 2024 year-to-date revenues and expenses. There's a lot of data in your packet, but Sandra, could you please give the high-level overview, please?
Okay, good afternoon. Sandra Montoya, Budget Manager for Clackamas County. And before you, you have multi-pages of, like Gary said, fiscal year 24-25 compared to fiscal year 23-24. So just a quick orientation, July 1 of each year begins the new fiscal year. And so this compares the July 1 period of 2023 to December of 2024, and the current year that we're in, which is July 1 of 2024 through now December 30th of 2024. And so we're comparing 2 years simultaneously, and we're showing you revenues and expenses. The first 2 pages is just a narrative of the summary of the changes that you're seeing, and we're calling out what some of those changes are due to. And I'm going to have you tell me how in-depth you want me to go. If there's any questions you have, I'm happy to walk through each of the sections, or if you just want a chance to review it and pause and ask me questions, that would be fine.
Commissioner Savas.
I'm not, I think I understood your question. I'll just tell you where I want to go a little bit, and you can just put it in the program and cover it when you want to cover it, unless you want to cover it now. So what caught me was the tax increase of 10.7 for our general fund, right? As I read that the taxes will generate 10.7 additional revenue. So my question is, in the same context, how much are cost expenditures, O&M, going to go up, or is predicted to go up? Does it eat into all of that 10.7, or is there room left over? That's what I'm kind of looking at. Just trending, so you can cover it whenever you like to cover it, but that's what I'm looking for today.
Very well, and I think that the only clarification I will make on the taxes is that that 10.7 is not just the general fund. The 10.7 also includes the levy for the sheriff. So that levy is included in Clackamas County. So that 10.7, there's a portion of that 10.7 that is dedicated to the levy, and it's in what we call a special revenue fund, which just by its definition means it's specific for a purpose. So it can't just be spent generally, whereas general taxes can be used for any purpose. The levy funds can only be used for that specific purpose that the voters approved. Yes, it's restricted, thank you. So I can get you, if you give me a few minutes, I can get you the split between the general fund taxes that are available, for discretionary spending versus the levy growth.
Great, thank you.
Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're talking, the team is behind me, and they'll get me that number, and then I'll be able to share that with you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I would go ahead and
If there's
proceed.
not any specific questions other than that, I can just go through some of the items that we're seeing at a high level. For me, the narrative is more difficult than the table that begins on page 12. That is an easier look for me. So I would, thank you, Andrew. We'll go there. And this, again, 23-24 in the peach color, 24-25 in the blue columns, and you can see year over year. This level is high level over all of Clackamas County. So Clackamas County, and again, Clackamas County, I say that not in the county-wide, which has 9 component units. This is just Clackamas County that this budget committee is responsible over. Right, so not the districts, not the agencies, not the housing authority, but this is Clackamas County with all of its departments that do include things like sheriff, CCOM, justice court, juvenile, district attorney. Those are in Clackamas County. So this is a large view, an overview of all of us together. And here you can see the beginning fund balance, that's the top row. And so this is just a normal revenue and expense report, and you can see total revenue for 23-24. The first one is the budget that we had set last year. The second column is actuals, and you can then compare that to 24-25. Again, the amended budget compared to actuals year to date. And you can see, just at a glance, last year, December through December, we had about, at this time period of December, 1.2 billion. Compared to December of 2024, we had 1.3 billion. So we're already, roughly about 80 million ahead in revenue. And then when we go to the personnel side or to the expense side, which comes in the next section, you can see that while the revenue is coming in slightly faster or has grown, the expenses are also doing the same thing. In December of 23-24, we had 403 million through that period. In 24-25, we had 509 million. So you can see, and then that 1% difference, 31% versus 32%, and you can see that significant growth that we're seeing. So the cautionary tale here, just at a glance, is yes, revenue is doing better, but expenses are growing at a faster pace. They're coming in faster. And then if we can start to drill down, you can see the biggest growth is in personnel, which we would totally expect because personnel makes up the lion's share of our expenses across the county. So when we start looking at a fund, generally we're seeing personnel is about 75% of the budgets overall, and that excludes capital, but just overall budgets, that's about where we're at. And so you can see to date, or I should say through December, 41% is where we're at, and that's the fastest growing expenditure section. I'm going to pause again. Any questions there? Okay, so then the next section.
Before you go, one of the things, though, that we do pay a lot of attention to is that third column on the percent to date. So, in a perfect world, 50% of the revenue and expenses would happen, but you'll see what's happening is that the expenses, while they're showing a lot lower than the 50%, what we're going to look for is the second part of the fiscal year, if there's a lot of spending that's happening, and why is that spending so different the second part of the fiscal year. You would expect personnel costs to be straight line throughout the year, and so you'll see a lot more variable in your M&S and capital outlay, so those are the things that will be looked at more closely.
Yes, and please, if there's any acronyms that we start to spit out that are unfamiliar to you, if you'll just let us know. So things like M&S, materials and services, FTE, full-time employees. So if we start with the jargon, please, cause us to, or ask us to slow down, because we want to make sure that you're keeping up with everything that we're sharing, because it all will start to tell a story in the end. Okay, so then the next pages, we start to drill down at the department level, and I'm going to make the distinction between a department and a fund. So a fund is just another way of cutting the same information, but the fund, if you can think of it like a business, and one fund cannot just spend on another fund's expenses. So they're each segregated, which is why we have fund in the system, so that we can keep them separate. But the departments can go across multiple funds. So for example, county administration, Gary is over the law library. Actually, the law library is in the general fund, so I misspoke. I'm sorry, tourism. Tourism is a perfect example. Gary manages Fund 100 in county administration, Department 12, but he also manages tourism, which is in Fund 255. So it's within one department, he's got oversight into two different funds. So that, again, it's another way of slicing the information, and that will become important as we continue on this discussion. And I say all that to tell you, in this roll-up, it's Gary, the tourism dollars are rolling up into this report along with the general fund portion. Okay, and where you will see that in Gary's county administration, you'll see contingency. That's at roughly $5 million, $4.8 million last year, $5 million this year. That $5 million isn't Gary's to spend, it's actually tourism's dollars. So that's the distinction I want to make, because Gary is not hoarding $5 million. It belongs to tourism, and those dollars are, by the board's decision, that tourism hold on to roughly 1 year's worth of operating expenses. That came as a result of COVID-19. And wanting to make sure that we safeguarded about 1 year of operating dollars for tourism. Any questions on that page?
See.
Good. We're going to keep rolling. So the next page, we've got county clerk and county council, and those roughly are operating on par with where we would expect. You can see that county council to date has got about 42% of expenses. Last year it was about 43. While that is 1% difference, this budget is relatively small. So not that big of a deal in county council, and I think I missed one. Let me go back up, county clerk. So Andrew, sorry about that. I'm going to make you jump up a little bit. But the county clerk, now that one, we're going to start watching a little bit because you can see that to date, it's 44% in December for expenses, but on the on the last year's, it was at 33%. That may be very normal, and actually, I believe it is because this was an election year. So that's the type of rationale that we start applying when we're analyzing each of these departments is what is the story behind the expenses? What's the story behind the revenue? Is it justified, and can we move on? Or do we need to throw up a cautionary flag and start having discussions with the department? Like, do we have a concern? So we're doing that, not just us as the budget team, but the departments are doing this analysis. And then when we start doing the budget reviews with Gary next month, we'll do a deeper dive into each of these departments to try and understand where they're at year-to-date versus prior years, and what does that mean for the future, so that we can bring those to you during those budget meetings in May.
Sandra, I'd like the committee to focus on the next two agenda items. So I would ask, have you noticed any anomalies in any of the department's spending at the half point of the fiscal year that you'd like to call out attention to the committee?
To be honest, Gary, at this point, not. This year is the first year that we've had monthly close reports for you. So I think we teased you a little bit with this report last year. I want to say it was probably about that April, May, but this is the first time you're seeing this report for 6-month period out of the year. And so I think really we're just asking you get familiar with the report, start looking at the trends, and then we will have more information as we start meeting with the departments next month, which right now we are deep into budget development. The departments were just asked to complete their initial requested budgets. They were due on Friday, and so we are just now starting to look at the data and what it means for next fiscal year. So nothing that really jumps out at this time. We've got vacancies throughout the county. We're looking at what that vacancy factor means, and really, it's more about the forecast.
Great. So committee members, do you have any questions? I know you've seen this for the last few days. Any questions you'd like to ask on the overall spending of the last 6 months for departments? Commissioner West has his hand raised, Chair.
I'm not quite sure if this is the best, I don't know if this is the best time for me to bring up my question. A lot of our time last year was spent with the sheriff's budget and how those funds are spent or prioritized between general fund or the levy funds. And there was a pretty robust audit that we spoke to a lot in this budget committee. I guess my question is are we seeing, since during this budget season or in this cycle, the sheriff's office completely comply 100% finally and hopefully with the recommendations from the audit? And are we seeing a resolution to those chronic and persistent issues that we tried to address last budget cycle?
So thank you, Commissioner. We did a summary of where, the status of each of the recommendations based on the motion that was made last year by last year's, budget committee. And we can send everybody the results of that. It's a little up and down. I wouldn't say there's 100%. There's still lots of conversations going on, issues raised, and while things are better in some areas, some of them are a work in process, and so I'll be happy to send that to all of you.
I have a quick follow-up, Cindy, to you. Some of those issues were more pressing and concerning than others. So not all issues within that audit that we wanted addressed as a committee are equal. Those are some that are more significant and problematic. Those more significant and problematic issues that were within the audit, are we seeing substantial movement? And now that we're almost into a new budget cycle, is there any hope that we can finally become compliant to the auditor's recommendations?
Commissioner, there's always hope.
Is it likely? Is it likely?
You know,
Are we being timely and responsive?
I would say that there remains a difference between the CCSO and county administration, county finance on the use of the levy dollars. That is, there's almost a line in the sand drawn, and it's really a conversation that has to happen in terms of what the board, because you oversee all the, you oversee all the funds, so it will be a board decision. I think there's some misunderstandings in terms of the levy dollars. In terms of, I think in the report said about the levy dollars being used to backfill general fund dollars, and that never happened, nor was it intended to happen. But there still remains that two different opinions on the levy dollars in terms of contingency and other aspects of that. We're waiting to get an update on the indirect distribution, the initial information that was provided needed to be updated to include all of the administrative costs that were able to be distributed. And my understanding that finance did not get that information yet. And there's still some problems in terms of how information is entered into the chart of accounts. Again, better than it was, but there's still issues.
I have to be frank, I find it really disconcerting and lacking that we're now into this 2 years with this topic, 2 years to address and to become compliant with the audit. If it was my recollection, I think I'm right, that this committee unanimously asked for that to be done. And we still continue to see potentially the sheriff's department not comply or operate in the same capacity and expectation as any and every department within the county. And it seems that there may be some grandstanding. I am concerned that, and it's not your fault, Cindy, but I find your answers not personal, but lacking in why we have not seen compliance in this. I think that the ask was quite reasonable. And the members of this committee were quite thoughtful and engaging on this issue. It's probably one of the most robust and best budget discussions the county has had in who knows how long ago. It's been a long time since we have engaged that way as a committee, put in that work and really dug in. And it's unfortunate that we do not see compliance with that independent audit yet. I don't know what has to happen, but to me, that's a concerning budget issue. And I hope that this committee takes that seriously as we address it moving forward. I'd like to see a resolution and compliance, to be frank. And I'm not convinced of that.
Yeah, I'd like to just respond real quick too. I think it's real important because I believe there's a difference of opinions, and I think one of the things that I think is lacking is not having the sheriff here to talk about their perception on it. I think that's one thing. I also know on the audit it also recommended that the county do some things, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to kind of look at the county was directed to do some stuff. Was it done? And where are we? And I know that County Administrator Gary Schmidt and I are working hard to kind of resolve some of this conflict. So I kind of wanted to put that on the record. And I do agree. We want to look at both sides, and we want to make sure we're hearing from both sides of it and try and find some common ground in there where we can kind of move forward together. So I know James Rhodes has a comment you wanted to make. Okay, and next I have Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Gary, I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't want to put Cindy on the spot, so I'm going to look to you.
Put me on the spot. Okay, go ahead.
And that is that I don't disagree with anything Chair Roberts said, but I would maybe couch it a little bit differently. I know there's been some staff changes, and I'm assuming those will be positive. I'm assuming there'll be some onboarding. There'll be opportunities with some new ideas, and I heard that from the sheriff who I met with for coffee yesterday. So I'm trying to approach this with a positive look towards. But when do you think? Here's my question: when do you think some of the things that the audit recommended will fall into ideally what was directed by the Budget Committee last year.
So you've given us 1 year to report back to you, and that's 3 months from now. So in May, you'll get a full report on everything the prior Budget Committee asked. Most things have been accomplished on both sides, the Sheriff's Finance Team and the County Finance Team. We're at 90% compliance. There's a few more things to do that I have confidence we'll achieve in a final report to you in May when you meet again. I have promised to the Sheriff a collaborative process, and she has promised the same. We will come hand in hand to you if we have challenges to bring it to you in a collaborative, positive way. So I am pleased with the progress. There's a little bit more to go. We're all working collaboratively on that. Respectfully, we have a lot more to talk with you today, and I'd like to move forward on the agenda if you'd allow us to. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary, for that. Just my closing comment on this, I think ideally that staff from, when this comes back up, that staff from both CCSO and staff from finance here can ideally present positive news together and that answer the technical questions together and be perhaps less political. So that's what I'm hoping. And I mean that from both sides, not one side.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Savis. I'll turn it back over to Sandra. You want to continue?
Actually, if we may move on to the next agenda item, we have 30 minutes left. General fund forecast. This is key. We want to update you on where we're at with the general fund as we come forward with the proposed budget you'll see shortly. Sandra, would you please give the overview?
Okay, so the general fund forecast, let me get to that page, please. Okay, so it's your page 24. This is a document or a page that you're going to see repeatedly. And what we do, this document, we call it a living document because it gets updated many times throughout the year. So it'll get updated when we have audited financials ready or completed for 23-24. It will get updated when we have amendments in the budget. So you'll see fiscal year 24-25. It says budget, that is the amended budget as of Q2. We have one coming up next week. When that Q3 supplemental gets done, this column that says budget FY 24-25 will be updated to reflect that. Shortly after, once we have the county administrator approval of his budget, we will be updating 25-26, which is year one, for the known changes that we have for that year. So when you see this report again in May, it will have those updated numbers. So I call that out because when you see it from period to period, you need to know where those changes come from, and it's because it's a living document. About the only thing you won't see changes in is the history that has already passed. So actuals for 21-22, those are audited. They're set. They will not change. Actuals for 22-23, again, they're set. They won't change. So then, going forward, everything that is 24-25 and into the future, you can anticipate that it will change as information is known or the board makes different decisions and takes action. So with that said, we can jump through and we can show you the current year 24-25 budget. We have a beginning fund balance of $98.9 million. This is the general fund. So again, the other documents that we were looking at previously were all of the county. This is specific to Fund 100. This fund is where the property tax comes in, and this is the fund where the county has the discretionary dollars. So, and I say that tongue in cheek almost because to the extent you've got programs that have already been approved and you have a commitment to those programs, whether it's a contract or agreement, that's not really discretionary anymore. But to the extent that you don't have those dollars programmed, you have some decision making. So beginning fund balance has now been updated for what we are seeing at the end of 23-24. I'm sorry, 23-24. Property taxes, that is the taxes for the general fund and debt service. So I want to call that out because that's a nuance. The debt service for general obligation gets paid out of this fund and we transfer it to a different fund for the debt service payments. federal and state dollars. You've got, the revenue that comes in, that, the biggest portion, gas tax, liquor tax. Those are the big dollars that we have in the general fund in this column. See, I'm trying to think through if there's any, general fund support, that's another big line item. All of the departments in the general fund or throughout the county that receive a general fund subsidy receive it through a transfer. What that means is that we've got that money double counted. We've got that throughout the budget document, is that the departments receive it as revenue coming in, but the general fund also has it as an expense going out. So you'll see it as a general fund support transfer revenue, and then if you go down below in the expense side, you will see general fund support transfer to departments. That's the expense side, and it lives in a department that we call non-departmental, meaning it doesn't belong to anybody, it's just the general money coming into the county, and then that's like the purse department, if you could understand that, and that's where we're distributing it from. So you're seeing, really another way to display that would be to net those against one another, but because the questions come up all the time about the level of subsidy, we found the need to break it out and show it this way. So we want to call those out. What you see, so when I am looking at the forecast, in my mind, we have been roughly growing in personnel at the pace of about 8 to 9 million. And again, that changes slightly incrementally every fiscal year as we roll through. And so you can see in personnel for 24-25, we are at 1.84 million. Last year, we were at 176.3 million. So just by comparison, you can see budgetarily, we've got 8.5 million budgeted. That budget number in the forecast has a vacancy factor in it. What that means is that we're using our experience to project what will this number look like going forward? Because, of course, we're never 100% full in any of the departments. I think I've shared with you guys a story in my career, 25 years. I think we've been fully staffed for 2 weeks of my entire career. We celebrated it when we hit 1 week, and the very next week somebody resigned. So it's like, darn. It just doesn't happen very often. Departments go through fluctuations, retirements, just normal attrition. Doesn't mean any of the departments are bad, it's just life. So again, we've got the vacancy factor built in. Materials and services, we've got the CPI built in, and we monitor that from year over year. We apply CPI Western to all of the escalators in the materials and services, as well as capital outlay. Special payments, that by definition is dictated by law, and it says when we send payments to an outside organization, this is where we have to code it. So that's why we have this category. And then we've talked about the general fund support, and for you, we have broken out or distinguished general fund support for departments, which is a subsidy, versus general fund support for debt. We have an obligation to make those debt service payments until they retire. Okay, so one thing I will call out on that debt, Commissioner Savas, you're going to be very happy. Year 27-28, we've called that out in the header. That is the year that we have the required balloon payment. I believe it's the 2012 debt service, and you can see that we have that balloon payment built in. It is now in this forecast period, and we've called that out for you. We also have in 26-27, and you're going to hear this for the very first time, but we have an opportunity to prepay. I believe it's our 2009 debt, and that is being able to prepay without penalty. So we've been monitoring that, and so long as we have been earning more interest than we have been paying on this debt, it's been good for the county, and we've said, let's keep that money in-house so that we can have interest earnings. But we're starting to anticipate that that's going to flip, and that we're going to be paying more on the debt than we're earning. And at that point, we will want to make the recommendation to you to consider prepayment. So we would be using or recommending that we use one-time money for that debt payoff. And so we've built it into the forecast just to preserve that opportunity. You will absolutely have the right, and we bring it to you so that you can make the decision on whether that is prudent for the county or not. Okay, so I'm going to, last line that I want to call out on this is the net operating income or loss, and that is what we have remaining at the end of the year before any capital, any O&M, or reserves and contingency. And with that, I'm going to pause real quick and just make sure you guys are all still with me.
Any questions?
It's a lot of information, so I want to make sure we give you all a chance to ask the questions you may have. Okay, so then the next line is courthouse capital and courthouse operating and maintenance. We, normally you'll hear the 15 million. That's what that roughly 15 million is made up of. It's made up of a requirement for a capital payment every year, and a requirement for the operating and maintenance portion. And then in future years, the replacement reserve requirement for the courthouse also kicks in. So when you hear people roughly talk about the 15 million, it's not exactly 15 million a year. It starts off at about 14.2 million, and it starts to go up slightly. And so we want to call that out for you. Then below the line, right after that, is what we have available for other capital projects in the county, because, of course, the county owns things like this building next to us, lots of other facilities throughout the county, and as they're aging, they have requirements or needs in order to keep them operational. And so every year, we set aside or transfer to Fund 420, which is our capital construction fund, and that covers the maintenance costs for those facilities. I'm going to pause again. You're all still with me. Okay. So then we have a subtotal for general fund support transfers, and you can see that number. This forecast, although it has a bunch of columns hidden, we have run this for the 30-year time frame for the courthouse. And the thinking with that 30-year is if we make small incremental cuts, and we did that over the last 2 and 3 years, that if we made small incremental cuts, they would be a lot less painful to all of the departments, because we would start to build up that set aside that is needed for the future. And no one would have to go through huge amounts of pain. So with that said, the next rows are the policy requirement for contingency. Contingency by budget law is allowable for us to use from year to year. So we would just have to do a supplemental. We request the board's approval of the use of contingency, and if you would approve that, then we're allowed to move contingency to an operating line item and make use of it. The 2 lines below it, reserve, again, that's a 10% of the taxes, fees, fines, so it's discretionary dollars. That's in a nutshell, that's what that 10% is. And reserves are not allowed to be used in the current year of adoption. However, you can use them, you can have them so that in the future you can program them and move them to an operating line item. But you'll see that as the county is projected to grow, that reserve amount grows as well. And that can be a little bit deceiving, because if you look out, to year 30, it looks like, wow, this crazy county's got 57 million in reserves and 60 million in contingency. And that's absolutely true. But when you boil it back down, it truly is still 5% of the operating budget and still 10% of the discretionary revenue. So when you're thinking about it like that, the number isn't as large as it initially appears. And then the very last item is unappropriated ending balance. This is the figure that we have been trying to balance through this entire courthouse process and the budget over the last couple of years. This is that linchpin, I guess, if you were, the lever that we have been trying to maneuver so that we give you maximum flexibility with discretion for the things that you want to do as a board and not hurt the departments. That's the balancing act, is not cutting the departments so much that we're having to, let people go or not do projects that need to be done, but also not going so far out on a limb that we can't meet the future needs. That's that sustainable, balanced budget that you hear so much about. So this last column that says unappropriated ending fund balance, that has been the row that we have been watching, that we've been monitoring so closely. Are we good? Any questions? The very last portion of this page just gives you the assumptions that we have built in. It's just plain speak English so that you know what we've built into this budget. And again, the goal is that we aren't so aggressive with the number that we get out on that ledge or so conservative that it takes away the opportunity for you to do projects that are of interest and need. Any questions or comments? Gary, anything? Okay.
Good work, Sandra, thank you. I know there's a lot of information, we're giving you a lot of data here, but do you have any comments or reactions on the general fund forecast?
Well, Sandra just covered it. I just want to say, looking at the unappropriated fund balance, and when I look at that, and I look at where we are in our actuals in past and where we are today and going forward, that $3 million number after, year 31, that's a pretty lean number. All I can say is that proportionally to the overall budget, it's going to be pretty thin and pretty lean for a long time, and especially in the latter years. So that's not as big of a number. That gives me a lot of comfort, which tells me it's going to take a lot of discipline for the next 30 years. I won't be here 30 years from now, but it's going to take a lot of discipline in commissions and budget committees forward to make sure we try to see if we can't increase that number on a percentage basis. But you look at it what it is today and what it would be, it looks lean. But that's a comment. I appreciate the fact that we're doing this exercise.
And Commissioner Savas, if I may, that is an excellent point, because $3 million seems like it's a lot. If we discount it back to 24, 25, and I don't have the exact number, but that's about 200,000. You don't have a lot of discretion. And I'm sorry to say that. We would love for it to be a lot more, but it took a lot of effort to get to that level. It's a really tight budget.
So I had just a couple questions. To kind of be clear, I guess this unappropriated ending fund balance, in order to balance this next year's budget, we really need to tap into those dollars. Is that my understanding?
Oh, give me 1 second. Let me look. No, so in 24, 25, that number is growing. So if you look at unappropriated from last year, 61.5 million, 24, 25, 71.7. Right now, with the assumptions that we've built into year one, yes, we will tap in slightly in 25, 26. And you can tell that because, and Andrew, I don't know if you can highlight unappropriated ending balance in 25, 26. That's 70,048,122. It's down
Right.
slightly. So yes, and I believe it's because we've got the first debt payment for the courthouse. That's what we've got coming online in 25, 26. We know that number, we will be eating into that number ever so slightly every year until year 30. We know that. That is part of the plan.
And then could you maybe just talk a little bit more about the $6.7 million debt balloon payment in 27, 28? And I know you said we're kind of set aside. I'm trying to see where that is.
So all we have right now is, if you look at general fund support transfer debt, it's right above operating expense. And Andrew, I'm going to ask you to circle that one again. Thank you for doing that. It says 13.2 million. It's 26, 27, 13.2 million.
27, 28.
It's 2728, isn't it? The 7.4 million.
Oh, so the balloon payment is 27, 28. The prepayment is in 26, 27, and
Oh, it
it's
is.
it's 13.2 million. And I believe it's an $8 million prepayment. 8.3? Okay, thank you. 8.3 million. And you can see the growth from year one, year one is 25, 26. If you compare year one to year two, that difference in those two numbers is the prepayment amount. And again, all we wanted to do is to introduce that idea and preserve that opportunity for you. That does not mean that it's done. We still have to get your permission for that.
Interested in this money. 27 money is up here.
Okay, and yes, the 6.7 balloon payment in 27, 28 is in that 7.4 million number in 27, 28. And that is a required balloon payment, so that's not optional, that is set.
Okay.
Is
I'm
that-
sorry. Whitney, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Is that debt tax supported with the tax levy?
No, so none of these debt service payments are the tax supported. These are what we call full faith and credit debt.
Okay.
So it is debt that has to be paid from the general
Gotcha.
fund. If I give you some examples just off the top of my head, there was some sheriff facility improvements made with this. There was PSB, so this building and DSB, so Development Service Building, Public Service Building, these buildings were done with that debt. And that is full faith and credit debt, not voter-approved debt.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Any other questions? I don't want to get ahead of you. Are you going to continue to go through this? Is that the intention, Gary?
No,
I think you're done now with the general fund
Right.
forecast.
Are you going to go to the courthouse? And
Yes.
Okay, I'll just wait until we kind of keep going. Thanks, I don't want to jump.
All
ahead.
right, next, I will take this one. Replacement County Courthouse FAQs. There's a document in your packet that brings together a lot of financial information about the Clackamas County Replacement Courthouse that exists in multiple places, but not in one place. And thanks to Chair Roberts for his suggestion, staff put it all together in one place for you, which is in the document before you. And if I may, a really high-level overview, after 65 years of effort, yes, 65 years by the Board of County Commissioners, because in 1960, the Board of County Commissioners discussed replacing the current county courthouse. After 65 years, it's almost done. The replacement county courthouse. It will be done in May 2025, approximately 2 months from now. It is a public-private partnership, as you know. The prior Board of County Commissioners agreed that the county would fund this internally with the general fund. There's no debt. But for 30 years, the county is going to pay for this courthouse project of the public-private partnership. The total cost of this project for the construction phase only is $282 million. But with the other subsidiary projects and efforts, transportation, road improvements, parking lots, and so forth, the total cost is $313 million, of which, and all this is in the packet in front of you. I'm jumping around, of course. The state of Oregon, though, has funded almost, not entirely, almost half of this project at approximately $139 million. There's a big milestone payment coming when the courthouse is completed in May 2025 of approximately $130 million. Don't be alarmed. The state of Oregon is paying that entirely of the match that they have already authorized to Clackamas County. What we will be paying as a county is the annual payments of approximately, as Sandra mentioned, between $13 to $16 million that will change over time. I want you to be assured, members of the Budget Committee and County Commissioners, we have solid financial footing to fund this 30-year repayment. However, the budgets are tight. That is absolutely true. And the prior Board of Commissioners, with respect, right or wrong, they have put future boards for 30 years to this tight budget. Unless the future boards decide to fund the courthouse in a different way. This is political, I'm sorry, and that's a future board to discuss. You could go to the voters and ask them to pay for this after the fact. It's possible. They may approve it. You'll have a lot of work to do to ask them to do that. But until then, this is how we're paying for the courthouse. So I'm actually going to stop talking. There's a lot of data here in this FAQ. Nothing here should be new to you. However, it's all been in different pieces in different meetings over the last 3 years. We'll put it all together in a single document. This building's going to open. We're not stopping the building, but if you have questions or concerns about the finances of the courthouse, happy to hear it today. Or leave it with us, and we'll answer it for you in the coming weeks. And then our intent is to post this document in a single place on the county website to be totally transparent to the public who may have questions about how this project is being funded. That is my presentation. Any questions you may have, myself and staff are happy to answer.
Any questions?
Well, yeah, I just want to just say, I just appreciate it all being in one place there. And, what I've been telling people, and staff is, hasn't disagreed, but I think there was a perception that we had debt for the courthouse for 30 years. And I describe this as a lease payment for 30 years, right? And as you mentioned, that grows from 14-ish to 16, 17 over the years. But it is tight. It's a tight budget. It's going to take a lot of discipline from here forward. That's all I have.
Just a comment, that was one of the things that I talked to Gary early on, and I just said I wanted to make sure we're providing some transparency about the total cost of the courthouse. There's a lot of questions, a lot of people would ask, what about this, what about that, as far as the DA, is that included or not? And so, Gary has worked diligently on this to help put it together. I think there's a few minor things I'd like to see different. We can talk about it. It's more or less moving a few things around. But I think it does provide that. We wanted to present it to the Budget Committee to make sure that really kind of to get your support, I guess, in moving it forward. But we'd then be able to kind of post it for folks to kind of say, hey, here's what it cost, and we're moving ahead, and we do have a tight budget. So is there any other questions about the courthouse?
Public members, if you have questions, if you have concerns, please raise them. There's no offense. We want to hear your thoughts or concerns about this, especially as you'll review the upcoming budget here in a few months.
I just want to make sure I understood what the chair just said. So there's no changes on here. This is more of the factual actual, right?
Factual actual that we'll post online for the public to see. I think the chair may want to just reorder the order of how some of these things are, and I'll talk with him offline about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And Commissioner
Really more
West.
technical changes that I think I'm trying to make sure we're providing clarity. And, there's one of the other things is, like Gary pointed out here, that it was kind of the FTEs that were eliminated to pay for the replacement of the courthouse. It does say the number of employees, and kind of, I would like to kind of see what that dollar is. And so there's really just some minor changes in it that I think I can just work with you on that, Gary.
Just to clarify, yes.
Yeah.
And Commissioner West has his hand raised when you're ready, Chair.
All right, Commissioner West, go ahead. You're muted,
You're unmuted,
Commissioner.
Sorry. Gary, is it accurate to say that over the last few years, we were able to stabilize our budget to afford the new infrastructure necessary for the courthouse that is almost complete?
Absolutely, yes. In my 6 short years as your county administrator, we've had a deficit. We've been cutting budgets every single year. And it's been painful and difficult, but I'm very, very grateful and impressed with all staff, all departments who came together to do what was right for you and the public to have a stable, responsible budget. And yes, we prepared for this. We're ready for it now, and it puts the organization in a good place. It's tight, but it puts us in a good place moving forward financially for the next 30 years.
Second question, is it accurate that Washington County is projecting almost a $30 million shortfall and in their general fund budget and that Multnomah County to our north is like 28-ish million or a significant number also, and in their general fund shortfall. And currently, while building a new courthouse and getting state buy-in, Clackamas County has no projected general budget shortfall. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay. Have you seen the cuts that we've had to make in FTE and right-siding our budget and allocated cost and budgeting to actuals and all of those best practices and all of the audit things that we did comply to within that audit, because the county has complied to those things and that were recommended? Have you seen our efficiency, our ability to service our constituents, or our ability to be responsive to the taxpayer reduced, or have you seen us continue to provide a high level of service?
I feel we continue to provide a high level of service to all of the county's constituents, the board's constituents, and we try and do better every day.
Gary, in your opinion, as a county administrator, have you seen any other county operate with these kinds of headwinds and still make sure that they are operating in the black and being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar?
Wow, thank you, Commissioner. Look, there's a famous saying by a former county commissioner, you've seen one county, you've seen one county. So I don't want to compare our county to any other county. Every county administrator, every board of commissioners across the state has their own challenges. We've done very well at this county thanks to the leadership of our board and our outstanding staff. Thank you.
I'll say this then, because I can do that. We've seen up and down the region significant and concerning budget shortfalls be announced. We saw a lot of misinformation that had been flooding the media and flooding campaigns and getting out there about the courthouse, things that weren't accurate. And when the reality is that we seem to have right now, though it is a tight budget, a very stable forecast moving forward. We're able to meet the need of building a new courthouse and that necessary infrastructure. Like you said, they've been speaking about it from this county commission since the 60s. And the other one is falling into the river. I think that a lot of boards, not just this one, but previous boards were involved in this process. And I think due to very judicious planning and good stewardship, there is a reason, and it is tangible based on policy and leadership, why we are the one county and large organization, government organization here in the metro area that is not seeing those same struggles at this time. And so I think that should be made clear and should be spoke to. And so I'm grateful for our county's leadership and being good stewards of the public resources.
Yeah, Commissioner Schrader.
I just want to say thank you. This was one of the best budget presentations I've seen. And it was so thorough, and how you went through everything, and the clarity of it was fantastic. And I do agree with Ben. I think we've managed, and Gary, I think because of your work as well, we've managed this budget tightly in a way that I think we truly are the only solvent. I mean, the other counties are really suffering right now. And I think we're on a pathway to stability for a long time at this point. So, thanks, Gary.
Well, if I could say something.
Yeah, Wendy, go ahead.
I feel really comfortable with it just because of the amount of reserves that the county has and the fact that you're paying for it as you go and in a conservative manner. I mean, the little bit of debt that you have is going to roll off. And I just feel like it was really well thought out and financed properly. So.
And if we could, Wendy, you may want to tell them what your background is, because that's important.
Well, public finance.
Yeah. Yeah, so Wendy spent her career in public finance, and when she applied for the Budget Committee, that was one of the things that caught the committee or the interviewing panel, it caught the eye, because we knew that we had some really tough times ahead of us, and she absolutely understands scrutinizing the financials of a government specifically. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the compliment.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, just closing comments. Wendy, when you mentioned our reserves, I was thinking back when I got here in 2011, that we had no reserve contingencies and no contingency plan or policy. And so we've done, it just goes to show how much refinement and work has been done to develop to get us where we are. And, that's just one piece of it. I remember when Cindy was department director, we had conversations like this, and, it's been took a lot of diligence to get where we are. Now, am I comfortable? Well, I'm comfortable with where we are right now, I'll just restate it. If I lose any sleep, it's going to be the discipline of commissions and budget committees to come over the years to keep this tight and recognize that. And that's what worries me. So I think we're on the right path, but man, we have 30 years to go.
Different story.
So if I could just make a couple comments. Are you about done? I don't want to cut you. Is this pretty much it, Gary?
I have one last thing to ask the committee. You're also over time. If you all could stay just a little bit longer, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, just a couple quick comments. Number one, on the vacancy savings, and I kind of want to turn to another page and talk about that in a second, and getting to full-time staffing. Trust me, I've been down this road. James Rhodes has been there too. And if you really just look at agencies, just give an example, you can get there. If you want 600 employees, I might get to 580. I might get a little bit less. If you plan ahead and overhire, I can get to those 600. If I'm always behind, as you just said, somebody retires, somebody, has a medical injury, you will never get to that full staffing level. So I can say, as the former sheriff, we did get to it, but just as you said, it was probably a week later and somebody retired or somebody got sick. So if you want to get to that level, you really have to consider overhiring, I think is what's really kind of critical. So I think the other thing I kind of wanted to switch to, which is page 30, and which gets down to, and it says this, it says full-time vacancy savings, right? And so when it gets down, which it says under there, there's 49 vacant, it has full-time employees, just say under the sheriff's office is 558. And I think what would help me understand this more, if we just had a general fund, list of general fund positions so that we could kind of look at that. Because when you look at that, that includes, and correct me if I'm wrong, the levy includes grant-funded positions. That really, and that is not kind of savings I can use. It's dedicated money. So when I shift off to the right and I'll see that great big number, I would assume that that's a lot of money, but in fact, it really isn't because we have to pay for those and they're continual. So I think it would help me understand this is just to have maybe a spreadsheet listing, hey, here's our general fund positions, and in Health, Housing, and Human Services, which Cindy, a lot of those are, again, pass-through or grant funded, and getting down to the ones that there could be savings on. So I think that, and then the other thing that I think would be beneficial, and I'm just throwing this out, is I think it would be beneficial to really talk to the department heads and really ask them, where do they think they'll be in staffing levels come July 1st? Because I do think that kind of gives us an idea about those vacancies and what do we think. And I think historically, we should track those to kind of see, and I'm sure you guys probably do. And so are we ever meeting those? Are we staying accurate on our goal to get there? So I think going forward, really kind of perhaps talking to the department heads, saying, hey, where are you going to be on this? I can just tell you personally, when I was in that role, if I knew I had a tight budget, I might wait half the year to fill some positions just so I could kind of make it through the end of the year. So I think it'd be a great conversation with kind of department heads on that. So I think that's really all I had for right now. I thought it was a great presentation, and I'm going to be working harder and harder to kind of get my arms around it completely. I appreciate Cindy and everybody's help. So with that, anything else, Gary?
Yes, so it's not on your agenda, but I'm seeking feedback from the public members, especially at the request of Chair. When would you like to meet in May for your Budget Committee meetings? Before Memorial Day holiday or after Memorial Day holiday? This committee has met both times over the years, either before or after. Before is the week of May 19th through 22nd. Memorial Day is on Monday, May 26th, and after would be May 27th through 30th. So do you have a preference? Would you like to do your work before the holiday or after the holiday? And we'd like to hear from each public member what you think, please.
I don't care. I just want it set so I can put in for time off.
Okay.
My own selfish reasons, I'll be returning from vacation, so after might be very nice.
Okay.
And I'm used to spending my birthday on the 30th with all of you. So
Thank you, Chief.
Sing happy.
I don't have any plans, so I'm flexible.
James?
I have no preference, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing, and so you would be after then, Jan, right? So we could have your birthday with us? So I'm hearing 2 after and the rest don't, are either way.
I have a comment.
Oh, Commissioner West, sorry.
So I believe Commissioner Schrader and I may be doing WIR in May, West. And so I am not exactly sure when that is on the calendar, but I know we're engaging and involved in that. Are you also doing that, Martha?
Yeah, I'll look it up. I don't think there's a conflict, but let me,
It's in May also, WIR.
Okay, we will check the commissioner calendars as well. So thank you for your feedback. Staff will work on this, and we'll let you know as, hopefully the next week or so, on what dates in May. The next meeting of this committee will be in April, Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. I hope you've already been notified of that. In particular, you will make a decision on the compensation board for elected officials. That would be the highlight of that meeting. But Tuesday, April 29th, 2025 is your next meeting. Chair, that is all the staff reports. Back to you for any final comments.
No, looking around, if there's any other comments, seeing or hearing none, this will conclude.
Sorry, Commissioner West has his
Oh, I'm
hand
sorry, I
raised.
didn't see it.
I just saw it.
Commissioner West, go ahead.
You're on mute, Commissioner.
You're not, sorry, I didn't take my hand down. I'm good.
You're done? Okay, sorry. He's done, Chair.
Okay, this will conclude our Budget Committee quarterly meeting. Thank you all, and special thanks to all our volunteers. Thank you.